episode 62 of Off Script with Trish Glose, intimate interviews and fun conversations with interesting people. In front of my microphone today is Mark Dennett. Hello, Mark Dennett.
Hello there.
I asked you before we started, hey, what's your official title? And you said...
I don't have one.
You don't have one. So this is Mark Dennett with no official title. Welcome to Off Script.
Thank you.
You do own a company, though.
I own a company.
Called?
The Dennett Consulting Group. And before I started that in 1999, I was a partner in an ad agency here called Laurel Communications.
That's right. You were. I remember you specifically. I did. You were actually a suggestion for me.
Wow.
By Kingsley Kelly.
Well, Kingsley is an old dear friend.
Kingsley Kelly is our general manager here at KTVL. He said, you know who you should interview? Mark Dennett. And he told me why. I'll get to that later.
Okay.
But then I was like, oh, I remember Mark. He did a political poll for us years ago.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I'm still doing political polling right now. Yeah,
Okay.
and research. I do a lot. My business started off doing a lot more marketing consulting and so forth. But now the Dennett Consulting Group does about 90% of our work is research. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Someone this morning said, who are you interviewing today for your podcast? And I said, Mark Dennett. And they go, who's he? And I said, he's just really smart.
Well, I'm not sure I'm really smart.
No, you are. We have to touch on the fact that I know your kid, Chris Dennett.
Chris.
For those of you listening, Chris Dennett, owner of Elements Tapas in downtown Medford and Beer Works.
Yes.
Also a super smart kid.
Well, yeah.
Super smart Alec too.
Yeah. He's a great young man and works really hard. Really hard. And I know he knows you well and has wonderful things to say about you.
Oh, that's nice, Chris Dennett. We love the Dennetts, so very dear friends of ours. All right, Mark, we're going to kick it off with my favorite question. Where are you from originally?
Well, people ask me that, and my father was a career naval officer. Mm-hmm. So I like to say I lived in 16 places by the time I was 16.
Wow.
So that's pretty close. I think my sister says maybe 14, and it wasn't 16, but it sounds better when you say 16 after 16.
16 has a nice roundness to it.
But I moved all over. My father was a career naval officer. I lived on the East Coast, Norfolk, Key West, Florida, Washington, D.C. But in about 1956, I moved out to San Diego, and that's my dad was stationed there. And so I kind of say that I grew up in San Diego.
Okay.
But until I moved to Southern Oregon, I had never lived any place for more than 2 years of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just constantly moved.
Did you have a favorite?
I certainly loved San Diego.
Yeah.
That was probably my favorite, just the one I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a small town called Coronado. It now has a bridge over it, but when I was growing up, we had a ferry. And one of the more interesting things is that when I turned 16 and I had to get my driver's license, I had to take the ferry over to San Diego to see a stoplight. Because
no way.
We had no stoplights, and my dad was teaching me. He says, well, you have to learn how to get in the right lane. And I said, what's a stoplight? I said, we didn't have stoplights. We had a couple of stop signs, but we had no stoplights.
Sounds kind of nice, actually.
It was great. Growing up in Coronado, and it was basically a military town, so almost every single person in the school was the military. A military brat, but it was kind of like Mayberry,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you went sailing, you walked to the beach, and went surfing, and you walked
Sounds
everywhere,
amazing.
and your parents just said, hey, be home by dinner time, but.
Right.
They never worried.
They didn't care.
They didn't care. I mean, it was an island. I mean,
right.
Very few people would get to it. It was a peninsula, but it's called an island.
Do you remember anything about Key West, living in Key West?
No. In fact, it was funny because a couple of years ago, I took a big RV trip and I went back to Norfolk. And I do remember, only thing I remember about that was wherever our house was, we walked across the street and then went to the beach. And I loved the beach. And so I tried to find it. Mm-hmm. It's a little difficult after 50-something years, And so Key West is very crowded now. I just don't remember. I remember it was really fun. I remember the long bridge ride to get there. But yeah, I thought Key West was a cool place. And but again, we only lived there for a couple of years, or maybe a year, and then my dad got transferred.
So did you find that you went to a lot of schools then?
Yep.
Okay. Did you find you got really good at making friends?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. People ask me, do I have a lot of friends? And I say, no, but I have a lot of acquaintances. And like in high school, I think I was named the friendliest kid in my class, And I realized that because you move, I never really invested a lot in long-term relationships.
Why?
And one of the funnier things I think is that I married my second wife, Marty, is from Broken Bow, Nebraska. Now that's in the middle of Nebraska. And her best friends, which are still friends, they come visit us all the time. She's known from the 2nd and 3rd grade. I can't even remember the school I went to in the 2nd and 3rd grade.
That's so interesting. My husband and I talk about friendships a lot. I feel like we have a lot of good friends, but I feel like those really solid friendships are very hard to come by.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I think for military kids, it's really hard because, again, they moved. Now, in my senior high school class, I think we had 198, so we were a relatively small school. 20 of us were freshmen. The rest of them all left because you had a 2-year tour of duty.
Right.
And so very seldom did freshmen graduate from Coronado High School. And so, but you become really friendly and you quickly make surface friendships and warm friendships. But, lasting friendships, those are really hard.
Does that bum you out now? Thinking about it?
No, not really.
No.
But it's just it's just a reality. And but you grow up very gregarious, and so that's been very good for a career and for things that I've done.
For sure.
And I passed it on to my son, I think.
I think you did. No, I say this all the time. I went to 3 different high schools in South Carolina, 2 different ones, and then I moved to Vegas and. Same thing. I got really good at making friends, but I never really had that group of, girlfriends or whatever.
Right.
And so I am jealous of other, females and males who have that kind of like group of people that were their squad.
Yeah, and we moved to Southern Oregon in 1984 when Chris was 10 years old, and it's just fascinating to me that he's grown up here and he has friends. From and he's known 10 years old.
I know.
And I find that just kind of like really fascinating.
Yeah. We actually talked about that in our podcast, that he essentially grew up in Southern Oregon.
Totally grew up. And, I remember coaching his soccer team at Rouge. And I knew nothing about soccer. And it was hilarious. But I thought, well, I can coach, I guess. And but and he went to elementary school in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Yeah. So anyway, very different. But he definitely grew up, and I thought he would leave eventually because he's traveled all over the world.
Right.
But he decided he wanted to come back.
Yeah.
Build a business.
And for those, we're not going to talk about Chris this entire podcast. This is about you, Mark Dennett. But I did interview Chris Dennett off script, so I don't know. I don't remember the episode, but. If you're listening and want to listen about Chris, it's definitely on here. Yeah. One thing I will say about him, and then we're going to get off the Chris Dennett topic, do not play Scrabble with that guy.
Oh, no, don't.
No.
No.
If you want to feel really stupid and really kind of bad about yourself, then play Scrabble with him. Yeah. But I do not recommend it.
No, do not recommend it. Yeah.
I think the more beer he drinks, the better he gets at it.
I think that's kind of true. I think that's kind of true.
All right, Chris Dennett, love you. So you grew up with a sibling or siblings?
I have a sister who is 3 years older, and she lives in Pasadena, California.
Okay.
And she was a teacher, and was a teacher for 32 years and then retired.
Nice.
And
what made you move to Southern Oregon?
Well, it's interesting. My career before I moved up here is, this is interesting for people who, a lot of people don't know how you start careers. And for me, I was just looking for a job. I'd gotten out of the Navy. I was a public affairs officer in the Navy. I actually, Trish, majored in broadcast journalism. So
Did you really?
I wanted to be Kingsley. I wanted to be a general manager of a television station.
Okay, hold on. Wait, time out. We got to go back. So you're in high school and you enlist in the Navy?
Well, I was in high school. This is interesting. I was in high school, and at that time, I really loved theater. Okay, I was president of the Thespians and love, and I wanted to become an actor. And I remember at that time, the Pasadena Playhouse was just going into a 4-year college program, and they offered me a scholarship. And I was very excited. So I went to my dad and, and said, hey, Dad, guess what? I'm going to go to this performing arts college. And he looks at me and goes, no, you're not. And I said, what? So I'm not going to pay anything for you to become an actor.
Oh, man.
And I went, really? I said, oh, well, okay. So I didn't take the scholarship, and so I was looking for, what I'm going to major in. And so I looked at all the things that I'm interested. I said, I love television. I just love everything about television. So I said, I could major in broadcast journalism. And the University of Oregon has one of the best journalism schools on the West Coast. The number one was Missouri. And I said, I'll go to the University of Oregon. Now, I had never actually visited Oregon.
Okay.
So my best friend in high school said, I go to Oregon all the time, and it's sunny and beautiful. You'll love it. And it's green. It's got all these trees. And so he and I flew up to Eugene to go to school, and it was raining, and it rained for about 3 months. And I remember turning to him and saying, I thought you came up here all the time. He says, well, I always spent my summers up here. I said, but you've never spent any other time but the summer? And I went, it's wet and rainy and it's miserable and it's gray and I don't like it. I'm from San Diego.
Right, I need sunshine.
Sunshine. And but I loved the school and I loved broadcast journalism. And I had gotten a job with actually King Television in Seattle.
Yeah.
And I was a junior, and I was doing a lot of television production. And I was about so excited. I said, I'm going to graduate and move to Seattle. Wouldn't that be cool? And I'll be a producer and writer. And then the Navy said, no, you're going to go, we're going to draft you.
Gotcha.
So I thought, well, if I get drafted in the Army, and I'm either going to die in Vietnam or when I come home to my career naval father, he will probably kill me because nobody in our family goes in the Army. They always go in the Navy.
Right.
So I said, okay, I guess I'll go into officer candidate school. So I enlisted and went to officer candidate school and then graduated and then went to Defense Information School in Indianapolis.
Okay.
Okay.
I got it.
Which was really fun because, first of all, it's 6 weeks on an Army base, and I'm a naval officer, so they leave you alone. And I'm reviewing what I learned in 4 years. I mean, I came out number one in my class because, well, and I could drink every night and have a good time.
Fantastic. I love it.
It was super. Anyway.
So funny because I was a theater nerd in high school, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to Broadway. I wanted to sing. I wanted to dance. I wanted to act. And my mom was like, okay, here's the thing. Let's think about something that you could do that doesn't require something that you could probably be homeless and poor for a long time. And I looked up broadcast journalism, and then I started doing live reports in the cafeteria at lunch just because I fell in love with this idea of being a journalist.
Yeah, and I did too. And isn't it fascinating because it is performance, but it's more controlled performance. I mean,
right.
and also that's one of the reasons why I think I love research so much. I just loved learning about people.
Yeah.
And this is a
Telling
great
their
example.
Story.
I just love listening to people. I
Same.
just find people fascinating.
Same.
And I said, well, in journalists, I can just interview people and write stories, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And I tried to be on the air, but I wasn't as good as you. I wasn't good as anyone. Actually, do you remember a guy named Mike Donahue?
Yes.
Okay, Mike Donahue ended up being a very, very prominent Portland.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a producer of a cable TV. University of Oregon had its own system. And I remember that we were trying to find somebody to do the newscast, which I was producing and writing with a friend of mine who ended up having a huge career with ABC in San Francisco, Lucille Clark. And Lucille and I are both trying to find somebody to be an anchor. And this 17-year-old Mike Donahue comes in. Like his first, he's never did this. And he sits down. I said, Mike, well, just read this. And Lucille and I look at you and says, my goodness, this guy is going to go really, really far in this.
17?
17 years old, freshman. And
wow.
we go, yeah, you got the job.
Yeah.
We don't pay, of course, we're all students. But I said, you're really, really good. And
Wow.
watch him in 4 years after I had graduated. And then he went on. But it's just interesting. And I haven't seen Mike since like the 60s. So, yeah.
That's
very
wild.
But
17.
Anyway, yeah.
So okay, now we can go back to San Diego. What makes you make the move from San Diego to Southern Oregon? You were saying this occupation.
Occupation primarily. So I came up to Oregon to go to college.
Right.
And then after I graduated from college, was going to get drafted. So I went in the Navy as a public affairs officer. And then when I got out of that, I actually was looking for a job down in Los Angeles because that's where I was living. And I saw an ad for a copywriter for an in-house advertising agency for Western Airlines. Western merged with Delta Airlines. And I said, I'm a journalist, but I can be a copywriter.
Sure.
I can write.
I can do that.
And so I get an interview. And I remember they said, well, I think we want to hire you, but do you have any samples of anything you've written, like in advertising? Mm-hmm. I said, of course I do. I just didn't bring them with me, but I can bring them tomorrow.
You liar.
So I went home and stayed up all night writing ads. And I remember I crumpled them up because I wanted to look like these were drafts.
Nice.
And so I go back and I said, I don't really have a lot of my original stuff. I just have some samples here. And he looks at it and he says, you can write. Great, you have the job.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Western Airlines.
So Western Airlines, and probably the reasons that many people know me up here is that I was involved in creating the first frequent flyer program in America.
Yes!
Yeah.
This is what Kingsley told me. This
Yeah.
is so amazing.
Yeah.
So Western later merges with Delta.
Yes.
Okay, so at the time you were a copywriter for this airlines, but how did this frequent flyer program?
Well,
this is the frequent flyer program model that all airlines
all
use.
airlines have used since. So basically,
And what year was this? Sorry.
1980.
Okay.
So in 1980. I had worked my way up. I was now manager, I think, of creative services.
Okay.
So I was responsible for brochures and anything other than radio and TV ads. So, banners and multimedia slideshows on Hawaii, you name it. If it didn't deal with exactly advertising radio, like radio, TV, or print, our little department did that.
Okay.
And so I was having lunch with the ad agency manager having lunch with him, and we weren't doing very well. We were losing we weren't doing well. In 1980, we were losing about $1 million a day.
Yikes.
Yeah. And so I remember we went out and had lunch, and we were saying, oh my goodness, I wish we could come up with an idea that would save this company, because I said, I can't think of anything. And I said, Andy, can you? And Andy, that's his name. And he goes, well, I can't think of a thing. So anyway, I said, okay, well, I got to wash my car before I get back. So let's just stop by the car wash. So we stop in this car wash in Marina Del Rey. And we're in this car wash, and they give us a punch card that says, okay, well, the fifth wash will be free. And Andy goes, gosh, I wish airline marketing was just that simple. And Andy and I, we stop. Bingo. We go, why can't it? Why couldn't we give somebody a benefit if they fly with us more often? And therefore fares and, your schedule wouldn't be important. We would be giving an award to the people who fly the most, our frequent flyers. And he goes, that's really cool. So anyway, Andy goes back to the agency, and he comes up with some ideas, and I come up with some ideas, and we pitch this to Western and says, we want to create a frequent flyer program that would reward our most frequent flyers. And it was fascinating that the first response we got was from our bosses and from the senior vice president of marketing. Why would you want to give rewards to people who already fly with us? And I said, well, because they're our best customers. Wouldn't you want your best customers to be more loyal?
Yeah.
well, they're already loyal. I said, no, but they could be even more loyal.
Sure.
And they wouldn't be terribly concerned about fares or anything. Maybe we could get a little bit more money out of them. So anyway, they finally reluctantly say, okay, you could test it on one route between Los Angeles and San Francisco. Now, that's a good idea, but we didn't know how we were going to do this. So they said, okay, Mark, you're going to be in charge of the group that develops this. I said, okay. And so we have to, first of all, how are we going to do this? We didn't have a computer. We had computers, but we couldn't track people with computers.
Yeah.
So we're going, how are we going to do this? And so we finally, I don't know who came up with the idea. I don't think it was me. It was on this committee now that I was in charge of. We said, oh, we could use a time clock. And we could have like a little card that, like you punched in and out. We could just buy these time clocks and put them at all the gates. And we could do a card called a Western Travel Pass is what it was called. And you just punch this in. And when you get 5 punches, you'd get $50 off your next flight. Okay, and so we bought these time clocks. We hid them under a little travel pass box, and it was a mechanical system. And we introduced it. And at the time, we were competing with 2 other airlines, PSA, Pacific Southwest Airlines, and United.
Okay.
And we had about 20% of the market. And we started this program, and in 30 days, we had 80% of the market.
Wow.
So we said, wow, this is really a cool idea.
Yeah.
And our bosses said, yeah, that's a really cool idea. We want to roll it out to all 35 cities.
Oh, boy.
We're going 35 times how many time clocks? And we're kind of, how do we do this mechanically? And then by that time, we had already decided that you could collect more than $50. You could collect up to 10 of these for $500. Okay. And so that's how the frequent flyer program started. It was so we rolled it out, and as we're rolling it out, we go sit down with our computer people and say, okay, well, how can we make this a computer system? Could we give a person a card, and could they enter this information? And they said, this will take, I forgot the figure, but it was like 200 man years or 200 man years of computer. I'm going,
okay, come on.
Yeah, exactly, Trish. I'm going, how long is that? I mean, I'll be dead by that. They said, well, we just don't have the computer power. So anyway, that's okay, we'll do a mechanical. And we did mechanical. And of course, that ran into a lot of problems. They broke down, and people would double clunch. It became quite, it was not a good system. And by then, United, which we had taken all that traffic from them on this LA San Francisco, they go, well, we have the best computer system in the world, so we'll just introduce a computerized system. So they did, and then Continental introduced it, and everybody, American introduced it.
They copied you.
They copied, but they had a far superior system. And so
sometimes it just takes that one brilliant idea.
Yeah. So anyway, but it was a car wash. I mean, it was that, and I think that's one of the things that I really learned in marketing, because a lot of people say, well, how do people come up with new ideas? And I say, the vast majority of ideas are not created new. It's a new interpretation of an old idea. So in other words, and if even if you look at the last 5 or 6 years, Amazon didn't invent buying. They didn't invent shopping.
They just made it super easy.
Exactly. They just reinvented, just like, colleges, online colleges. They didn't reinvent the college. They just said, there's a better way of delivering this. So I think that's the key, is that, and then you're discovering this right now in broadcast, is that, okay, you're a journalist, but it doesn't have to be over there. It can be in podcast. Right. It can be online. It can be Facebook posts. So, it's just like, okay, how do we share information? And I said, that's the revolution. It's not that we're sharing information or stories.
We're just doing it differently.
We're doing it differently.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All from a car wash.
All from a car wash.
Because you think about, there's those great ideas out there, and you kind of go, why did I think of that? you know?
Yeah.
And you probably have.
Exactly, Trish. And most of us think of these, but we don't make that unexpected connection.
Yes.
So, that's what I learned. You've always, to be creative, you always have to look for the unexpected connections. Look for the unexpected connection. Think of something and say, okay, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to and for us, but again, it was so interesting because I remember we did an analysis of the frequent flyer program, and this guy in the finance department comes and says, well, if we keep this going for 5 years, everybody will be flying for free because we'll have so many people on the program. Yeah. And I remember, this is where I was wrong. I said, nobody will do a frequent flyer program longer than 5 years. By 1985, those programs will be dead.
And no, they're alive and kicking.
I'm flying to Australia on frequent flyer miles.
Look at you.
So
does it feel good, like when you booked that ticket on frequent flyer miles, does it feel a little good to you going, I kind of started this?
Well, I don't, I can't take, quote, singularly. I was on a team. Yes, right. I was certainly there at the beginning of the idea.
It was you and Andy.
Yeah, me.
What's Andy's last name? Do you remember?
Pitlick, Andy Pitlick. Unfortunately, he passed away about 10 years ago. He was a chronic smoker, folks, and I mean like 3 packs a day.
Oh.
And actually, this is a side story. Andy and I get invited to BYU to judge the student ad contest.
Uh-huh.
So we fly to Salt Lake, which is one of our routes, and we go down to BYU. And we're standing there getting ready to judge, and I can't find Andy. And, this is like the whole audience is waiting, the 20 participants are waiting, and I'm going, I don't know. I'll go see if I can find Andy. Andy has been arrested by the campus police in BYU for smoking in the laboratory.
Andy.
And I am just beside myself because I'm thinking, my goodness, I'm going to get fired from, I'm supposed to be, I said, Andy, what are you doing smoking? This is BYU, we can't even have coffee and you're smoking.
That's hilarious.
So anyway,
I love it.
I finally tell him, I said, well, so we get him out of there. He goes in and we judge this, but it's hilarious. But Andy was a great guy.
Sounds like it.
Wonderful man, but
awesome. I love the fact that it was this very much a team thing, but
yes.
As you were saying, these ideas, if you really look at them and analyze them, there aren't a lot of very new ideas.
Exactly.
Just old ideas.
There's some, and I'm just not smart enough or brilliant enough to actually come up with an entire new idea.
Well, Amazon's a great example.
Yeah.
Speaking of Amazon,
yeah.
Oh man.
Exactly.
You just click.
Click.
Yes, the address. Yeah. Yes, this credit card. Thank you, Amazon. And
exactly.
2 days later, it's there.
And if you don't like it,
you can send. I know.
You just call them and they go, oh, here, print out this label, put it on. We'll pay for the shipping back at FedEx. And
it's brilliant.
It's gone, and
not an advertisement for Amazon,
no,
but I sure do love Amazon.
But that is exactly what,
yeah.
So, when businesses come to me over the years, I said, okay, just look at your business and then look at ways that you can rethink your business. Is there a better way to do what you're doing?
Sure. So when do you get out of Western Airlines?
So anyway, Western was going to merge with So our frequent flyer program worked in 1980, June of 1980 actually was when it started, and it was working very well. But we still, a lot of businesses, Trish, are either they're too small to survive, and so they either have to merge and become bigger. In other words, they just can't get the size they need. And the airline business is very, very costly. These planes are not cheap.
Nope.
And they can be moved instantly. So, one of the things is that you might dominate Los Angeles and San Francisco, but Continental or United could say, I think I'll move the 10 extra planes we have, cut the fare in half, we'll outschedule them, cheaper fares, and we'll put them out of business.
Wow.
So
just like that.
And that's what they do.
Yeah.
Predatory pricing is alive and well in the airline industry. It still is. So anyway, we were struggling, and I was on a secret team that was talking to Delta Airlines about merging. And then I didn't want to move to Atlanta because that's where you'd have to move. I was a West Coast kid, San Diego, Oregon. I just said, no, I should move to Oregon. And at that time, in the early 80s, one of the more popular TV programs was Bob Newhart's. Okay, remember he ran.
I remember. Yes.
Stephanie and him, and they ran a B&B or a lot.
Yes, they did.
I thought, and he was a writer. Remember, he was a writer, and he also
wasn't it the Daryl and my other brother?
Daryl and my other brother Daryl.
Okay.
So, I think I watched too many of those.
You wanted to be Bob Newhart?
Yeah. So what I had gone up to Eugene for an event, and I was driving home, and my first wife said, "Have you ever been to Jacksonville?" I go, "No, I've never been to Jacksonville." Okay. She says, "Well, I've been. I thought you would love Jacksonville because your relatives, my grandfather, Dr. John Dennett, was a traveling circuit doctor in Arizona. So he knew Doc Holliday, he knew Wyatt Earp, he knew all those people.
What?
Yeah, that's a whole different story. And
Wait,
so
we got to tell that story.
So anyway, we drive through Jacksonville, and I say, "Wow, look at this place!" And it was the McCulley House, and it was a big, huge white place.
Beautiful.
And E.K. Meadows, these are the people, and I said, "Wow." I said, we could move up here and start a B&B. Wouldn't that be cool? Mm-hmm. And my first wife was an interior designer, and I'm a marketing travel guy, and we loved B&Bs. And I said, and there weren't very many B&Bs in 1984. Mm-hmm. So we said, let's do this. So let's make an offer contingency the sale of our house in L.A. And they said, they'll never take that, because but I said, well, let's just make the offer. So we made the offer. And got home, and I called a realtor and said, okay, well, let's see about putting our house on the market. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the bottom line is that I had a confirmed offer for my house in L.A. in 72 hours after seeing the McCulley House in Jacksonville.
It was meant to be, Mark. It was meant to be. I guess.
So I go, well, I guess, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Let's move to Jacksonville.
Isn't that interesting how that happens? You end one job and then poof, here's another.
Yeah, so
you owned a B&B.
I owned a B&B.
McCulley House specifically.
At the McCulley House Inn, yeah. And so we converted it to an inn and added a couple of bedrooms and baths. And
how was that?
It was one of the worst experiences of my life, but that's okay. It was.
Wait, how so?
Well, a divorce and other things didn't help.
Okay.
But running a B&B is very interesting because I have a couple of friends that still run B&Bs, mm-hmm. and probably the best friends are the ones Fred and Karen Wickman up the Prospect Hotel.
Okay.
They have a great product. But basically, it's a 24/7 job, and I realized, even though I am an extrovert and I love people, I can't do it 24/7. Mm-hmm. I can do it 5 days, maybe 6 days, but I need a break.
It's all the time.
I can't do it all the time. I can't do it every day.
Did the divorce happen after you got the B&B?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you were doing this by yourself?
At first, my wife and I were doing it together, and then we got divorced, and then she ran it for a while.
Okay.
But then she didn't want to do it, and then I came in and ran it. So that was there was about a 6-month period there where I had my own ad agency and running a B&B, and also trying to actually see my son occasionally, which was
challenging.
Which he didn't see me a lot. So anyway, it was very challenging, and these were very interesting days. You know?
I bet. Yeah. Okay, we have to get back to Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Okay. You said this is your dad or your grandfather?
It's my grandfather.
Grandfather.
So Dr. John Dennett, he got his medical degree from Harvard and got tuberculosis. And this was the 1890s. And so he said, well, I can go to Arizona, and there I can become that would be great for my health. So he comes out to
Why Arizona? Because it was dry?
And the air and so forth. So he moves out to Arizona, and in the 1890s, he really couldn't get a practice like in Phoenix. So he became what they call a traveling circuit doctor, very much like a traveling minister.
Okay.
So what he does is he'd go around all these mining camps, mining towns, and on Monday the doc's in, Dr. John is in there, and then on Tuesday Dr. John's here, and so forth and so forth. And one of his regular tours was Tombstone, Arizona.
No way.
Yep. And so one of his patients was a guy named Louis B. Gage, Gage. By the way, that's the name of my sister, Gage, so that's going to tell you a little bit of the story.
Aww.
So Louis B. Gage hired him to do, because he had the major mine in Tombstone,
Okay.
so he was always there. And Louis B. Gage had a really, really cute daughter who ended up being my grandmother. So Dr. John asked Louis B. Gage if he could marry the daughter, and they said yes. And so that's my connection to Tombstone. And
wow. So he knew?
Oh, he knew Wyatt Earp. He knew Doc Holliday. He knew all of those people. And when I was growing up, I've always loved Western history. Okay, I'm kind of a Western movie fan. He would he'd tell me these great stories. Oh yeah, Doc, he was kind of a drunk, but he was a pretty good dentist, and
Yeah.
And what was Wyatt Earp? Well, Wyatt Earp was really he was kind of a nasty guy. I liked his brothers better,
Oh my gosh.
So I just found this so fascinating.
For sure.
Yeah.
And didn't Doc Holliday, what did he die of eventually?
Was it
tuberculosis?
I thought it was tuberculosis,
See, that's
but
what I
I'm
thought.
not sure. But he
I'm
definitely,
not
I'm not sure. So, but yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's the coolest story ever.
Yeah, and actually, this goes back to my Western days. So my very, very last interview to get a job at Western Airlines was with the president of Western Airlines, and so I was interviewing with him, and this just shows you, if you want a job, you use everything you can think of
Yes.
to get a
Everything.
job. Everything. And so I'm sitting there with this guy, and he goes, and I talk about, well, my grandfather and my dad grew up in Arizona. He says, oh, I was born in Tombstone, Arizona.
No way.
And I went, oh, that's very interesting.
Here's a story for you.
Can you tell me what year that you were born? And he goes, 1909 or something. And I went, oh. I said, well, my grandfather probably delivered you. He goes, who? I said, well, just check Dr. John Dennett, check your birth certificate. And so, a day later he calls me and says, you've got the job, but do you know that your grandfather did deliver me?
Oh my gosh.
And I went, well, great. Well, thank you. I'm glad that he was available.
And you remember your grandfather and growing up with him and all these stories.
Yeah.
That is so precious to me.
So, but we were never very close because he was always in Arizona, and either we lived on the East Coast or we lived in San Diego. So until his last few years, then he moved over to San Diego.
And your grandmother's name was?
Was Gage, Louis, Cynthia. No, what was my grandmother's?
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
It's terrible. I can't remember my.
But it was Louis.
It was my you call her grandma.
Grandma. Exactly. But it was Louis B. Gage's.
Louis B. Gage is, if you look up in your books, or history books, Louis B. Gage was the one that owned the major silver mine in Tombstone.
It's his daughter.
And his daughter was my grandmother.
And there is your history lesson in episode 62 of Off Script. Yeah. I love it.
Totally off script, isn't it?
It really is. That's the whole point, though. These just kind of meander through your life, which has been super interesting. So this ad agency, local ad agency, how long did you have this?
I didn't start it. I joined it. Ellen Kolawa started it. And so I met her at a wine function, and she says, I
love this story already.
I'm starting an ad agency, and I've got a creative director, Michael Lee, and other people, and we kind of need an account person. And I said, well, I'm looking for a job, and I said, I could join your I couldn't find a job here. I had interviewed with one of your competitors, and so I said, no, I don't think I want to sell advertising for a TV station.
Right.
Great job, by the way. I'm not knocking it. I just said, no.
Not for you.
It just wasn't my, I wanted to do more creative work, like writing stuff and producing stuff. And
Yeah.
and so
So was this the ad agency you were working for when you started doing the political polls?
Yes.
Okay.
So Laurel Communications, and because I had a real interest in research, Laurel started a research kind of function. And at that time, I came to KTVL and the Mail Tribune, and I said,
Yes.
hey, why don't we do a political poll? And so they both said, okay, we'll do one. And that was really eye-opening, Trish, because here I'm just a little tiny little company. And I run this poll, and we run I think we did 2 pre-polls.
Yeah.
And I was just stunned how nasty the Democratic and the Republican Party can be.
Really?
Because when this poll didn't support one of their candidates,
Yep.
I was getting literally threatening calls, national calls from the Republican National Party going, we'll put you out of business. You're such a little guy. We'll make sure you never have another job. And I said, hey, I'm just reporting, you need to change this. You cannot report this.
Wow.
And I got the same thing from the other side. So it wasn't one side.
What year was this?
I
poll?
don't remember.
I want to say it was like more than a decade ago.
Oh, yes, more than a decade. It was probably
Like maybe 2003 or 4? 2004 was a presidential year.
It was probably 2000, 2001. I don't know how long, but yes. But it was not recent. And since then, I've done a couple of political polls, but I really stayed away from them. First of all, we're not a Republican, we're not a Democratic, we're independent.
Right.
And, most of the people who politically want to do polls are aligned with some
There's an
agenda, and we never had that.
Isn't it interesting, though, this poll where you were getting threatening emails and whatever was early 2000s, and we are not only dealing with the same stuff today, it's even worse.
It's even totally worse. And these were truly threatening phone calls, mails.
Sorry, we have a newscast coming up. That's our hey, get down here for a tease. But yeah. So in political polls, I have no knowledge on these. Are they all science?
Yes. Well, I'm actually doing a series of talks right now called on polling for the Rotary clubs here.
Okay.
I'm kind of talking to different Rotary clubs. And I'm talking about what's the problem with polling today. And most polls today, they just have an agenda because it depends on who sponsors them. But polls don't have to have an agenda. Mm-hmm. Political polls can be very, very real, and the problem with political polling or any kind of poll is that it's a snapshot in time. It's like today's view.
Yeah.
So for you to look at a view of the 20-something candidates for the Democratic Party and say, we know who's going to beat Trump 14 months from now, is kind of, it's nice entertainment, but it's not science.
So is the point then we should just look at these polls as like today in this moment, right here and now, and just as entertainment?
Yeah, as entertainment. Yeah. It's fascinating entertainment, and what could make this change, or what kind of events will happen.
Interesting.
So in a 24/7 news cycle, you got to have something to talk about.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
You've got to have something to talk about. You can't just keep. And so polls are really cheap.
Yeah.
Okay. You can, and again, so when you look at an like for example, let's just look at an MSNBC poll or a Fox poll or anybody of those, they're doing those polls basically by online with people who have subscribed to their channels. Mm-hmm. Now, why wouldn't, if you did a poll of Fox listeners or MSNBC listeners, wouldn't they have a different agenda?
1,000%.
Exactly. So it's like starting off you do not have a non-biased sample.
Right. But I think intelligent people will look at a poll and go, oh, this is a
Absolutely.
snapshot. And I think you cannot, Kingsley Kelly has always told me with TV ratings, we live and die by the ratings. So when they're good, oh, they're right, they're flawless, we love the ratings.
Yeah.
When we get a bad rating, oh, something must be wrong, there was a glitch somewhere. And it's the same with polling.
Absolutely.
We've heard our own president with a poll that's in his favor. Best poll I've ever seen.
Exactly. And it's a flawed poll. No, and the other thing that people don't really realize that no matter what kind of poll you have, there's always a margin of error, okay? So statistically, and most polls you see nationally are plus or minus 4%. But most people think that 4% means that, if it's 50, that means it must be either 52 or 48. Okay, 4% difference. No, it's 4% more or 4% less. Okay. That's 8%. And for example, if you go back to the Hillary Trump polls, no poll in the last 2 weeks of that campaign thought she would win by 8 points.
Interesting.
So she lost like 47. That was within the margin of error of the poll. But people didn't listen to that because they said, she's got 53, 54.
Gotcha.
But the margin of error was 5. That means it could be 5% more than that or 5% less than that. And those polls were actually quite accurate.
I was just going to ask you, have you gone back to see some of the polls, either you've done or national polls or whatever, and said they were right on the money?
Yes. And the vast majority are.
Interesting.
If they're not, it's because the sample they took it was wrong. And that was a lot of the problem with polling for the Trump and the Hillary, because most of those polls were polling more urban areas, okay, because they were using online. And most rural communities don't have very good online services back then, and they still don't. So, you're going to have more urban, more West Coast, East Coast, big city in that sample. You probably underreported or have a sample of less people in North Dakota, South Dakota, Alabama, Louisiana. All the places where Trump was stronger. So there was probably a bias in their sampling data.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you're still doing polling?
Yes, we're still doing. In fact, we just, this afternoon, I'll be working on one that we just did for Brookings.
Fantastic. Based on what?
Brookings, a group of people in Brookings, a task force, a volunteer task force, wants to create an event center in Brookings.
Okay.
And they hired us to find out if people in Brookings and the surrounding communities would be supportive of an event center.
Interesting. It's all research.
It's all research. And, and so we're going to be able to say, well, as of today, they think this.
Gotcha.
Now, will they think this in 2 years from now when you have plans and money or you figure out how you're going to do this? We can't tell you that.
Right.
Well, we can tell you right now what people think.
Because humans are fickle.
They're fickle, and example I use. Somebody said, well, does somebody have? What would be your thought about North Korea? Well, your opinion of North Korea would be very different than 2 days ago when Donald Trump met with the head of North Korea on the border. That was an event. And one of the things you learn in marketing and public relations is that events create public opinion. Trish, no one really has an opinion on everything until an event creates that. And one of the problems with 24/7 news is that this is a constantly changing event, and depending who you listen to or who you watch, that's an event. And so, when you share the news every night, you're creating a news event.
Oh boy.
Okay.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, and and I think you and others really take it seriously. And I think, by the way, local news takes it much more sensitive because they're closer to the people.
Thank you. I've been saying that for like the last decade. I just feel like local news is different than national news. And please don't lump me into Fox News and MSNBC and CBS Evening News, although I love it. I mean,
You're absolutely right. And
we're different.
And I can't, obviously, I can't share some of the Brookings study, but we ask people where they get their news, okay? And all I can tell you, without revealing anything, local news, local newspapers have a tremendous role in local communities. They are respected more. They are honored more.
Nice.
They believe that they are less biased. So it's heartening if you're a broadcast journalism major.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are you saying KTVL is popular in Brookings?
Well, we didn't actually track KTVL, but we
Let's
could
do
do a
that
study.
poll. Yes.
We could do a study for you. We could find out for you.
That's the poll I want to see,
Yeah.
Mark Dennett. Do you consider yourself a numbers guy, or do you think you're just more of a research guy?
Well, it's interesting. The head of my research division is a guy named Dr. Nick Luigi. Okay, he has a PhD and he works for the University of Oregon, and Nick is the numbers guy. Nick is the reason I think our research firm has done quite well over the last 30 years, or at least since 2000, is Dennett Consulting Group started in like 2000. I think it's because we bring not only the real numbers, research numbers, math, but my background in marketing, I know how to interpret numbers. And so the problem with most research that I see with businesses is that somebody does a beautiful job and gives you a 200-page report with all these numbers, and you don't know what to do with it.
No.
I mean, you've just been overwhelmed
I'd be
with
lost.
data.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like super data, and you go, well, all right, but what does all this mean?
Break it down to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Exactly. And marketers know how to do that.
Yes.
Because that's how we communicate. We communicate on the first grade level with most people. So I think we bring a very interesting combination of skills. And that's why we have done very well, because people say, okay, I can tell you that it will be scientifically pure, but I will also tell you, of the 200 numbers we have, these are the 10 that are really important.
This is what you have to look at.
This is what you have to look at.
I love it. We are going to wrap up, but I do think there should be a poll in our future.
Yes.
A KTVL Mail Tribune poll.
I'd love to.
Again.
Yeah. Now I think I'd have to, put my armor on and thinking, because the pressure, the national pressure. And again, I don't do political campaigns. The only one I actually have ever I've worked on a couple of campaigns, but very seldom do I do marketing with campaign. But I think Don Skundrich, when he was running for county commissioner.
Spears to control room, please. Control room.
We're in a news station.
Good.
Okay.
And but I remember that I was amazed that during his campaign for a local county commissioner, and he was running as a Republican, and I'm an independent, how much pressure the National Republican Party tried to tell him what to say and what to do.
Oh my gosh.
I was just stunned. I said, well, why do they care?
Right.
Why do they care? I mean, frankly, I could make a good argument that county commissioners shouldn't be partisan. My goodness, they represent the entire county.
I agree. Why? Yeah. Why are we voting in Republicans and Democrats?
Exactly. We should just get the person that, and Don believes that, by the way. And but that's the system, and you have to run as a Republican or a Democrat, and so forth. But it was amazing to me. So yes, I'd love to do a poll, but I bet the pushback will be even worse.
Well, people, first of all, be nice, and second of all, maybe keep your opinions to yourself.
Absolutely.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
All the mamas used to tell us, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
That's a good Southern. That's a good Southern
just
statement.
Keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of the flavor, though, these days, especially in politics. If you're Republican, this is how you have to vote. If you're Democrat, this is how you have to vote. And I get it. We have voted these people in because their mindset is somewhat close to ours.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be lovely to get to the day where we just elect people because we like their values and who they are?
Yeah.
And we said, hey, this is what we want you to care about, whether you vote far right, far left, whatever.
Yeah, and
in the middle.
And wouldn't it be great if we get back to a time where we were just nice to each other again. I mean, when I took this RV trip down to the South, I was and I was visiting relatives and people I hadn't seen for years and years and years and years. But I really did notice that the South, there really is a Southern hospitality.
It is. It's true.
It's real. You can feel it. You know, they may not agree with you politically, but, you know,
they're going to offer you a glass of sweet iced tea regardless.
Exactly. And they're going to welcome you to that restaurant, and they're going to be kind. And, you know, I don't know. You know, I think today we just think that, I don't know. I think, you know, one of the things that my dad told me, you know, I was thinking of the things that what have I learned in my life? What has managed my life? And one of them was my dad once said to me, you know, nothing has more value than personal integrity. And, you know,
Amen.
I have tried to run my life that way. I hopefully my sons and my stepsons have done that also. But, you know, personal integrity, you know, I think you have personal integrity.
Well, thank you. I try.
And I think most people have personal integrity. And when we get to a point, regardless of, I question the personal integrity of many of our elected officials. And I'm not arguing about the Republicans versus the Democrats. I have seen many Republicans and Democrats that have personal integrity, but I have also seen many that don't.
Yeah.
That don't. And that's sad.
And if we really sat down, we would realize that there's more that brings us together than divides us.
Oh, absolutely. And,
so.
you know, this is one of the cute stories about going back to Rouge. So I was a soccer coach for 10-year-olds. So if anybody knows Rouge, back in 1984, Rouge is a pretty hippy-dippy. I mean, it's basically, you know, they were growing it back in 84.
Yeah.
And so one of the persons on my team was named Sunshine, and he was a great player. And I saw his parents, long hair, classic 60s hippies.
Love it.
And then I had others that I looked at them, and they have short hair. They're obviously working for some corporate office. So I looked at this whole audience in Rouge, and they went from literally 60s hippies to very conservative people. You know, they all wanted the same thing. They all wanted their kids to have fun. They all wanted their kids to participate. And they all wanted their kids to have a wonderful time.
Yeah.
And they all did. And the team, you know, we didn't do well. But so I thought, oh, wow, isn't that cool? Is we all can find things we do agree with.
Absolutely.
You know?
Every day.
Yeah. And so I just think we do. And I think what we do is, you know, I can't believe that we don't want a better immigration system. I mean, I think if I did a poll and asked a question, do you want a better immigration system? I bet we'd get 99% people saying
Really?
yes. Now, what is a better immigration system?
Completely different question.
Is a very different question.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's where the debate should be. The debate shouldn't be we don't want these people or we do want these people. That's ridiculous. The point is that we should have immigration. We're a country that that was built on immigration.
On immigrants, yeah.
You know, you know, the original Dennetts came over on the Mayflower, or actually right after the Mayflower, and you know, we let you all in. You know, we didn't close the door behind us. We said, okay, fine, we'll let you in, you know. And so how can a country that's built on immigration actually believe that we shouldn't have immigration? No, we should, but it has to be managed, it has to be
better
controlled.
systems in place.
And we just don't want to come to that debate. And I think that's sad.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway,
okay.
Off the subject.
Oh, it's off script.
Off script.
That's what we're doing here, Mark. Okay, let's get to the final three. Best advice you've ever been given.
You know, the best advice that I was ever given, besides my father's advice I just shared.
Which is about personal integrity.
About personal integrity. But the best advice was one of my early bosses said, you know, Mark, you will always be paid more for your ability to work with people than any knowledge you will ever have. And I think that's probably the best piece of advice, is that none of us work alone. None of us work in an isolated world. We all have to work with others. And so your ability to work with others is far more important than any knowledge or training or skill you have. Can you work with other people?
Interesting. I'm good at working with other people.
Well, and it shows. And Kingsley is. Okay?
Oh.
You know,
He's the people person of all
absolutely.
people
And
persons.
so, you know,
Yeah.
and does he have knowledge? Of course he has knowledge. We all have learned something.
Yeah.
We haven't just been carrying our lunch to school, you know. But I think that's really the key.
You know, we look at our kiddo who's 20 and he, you know, looks you in the eyeball when he talks to you. He shakes your hand. He works well with others. And we say all the time, like, he's going to be fine.
Yeah,
He's going to be just fine.
it's going to be fine.
Because you can work well with others.
With others.
You can
And-
play well with others in the sandbox.
Exactly. And so, you know, how many times when you're a little kid, you go, you know, they should really play better together.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure. I love it.
Anyway.
If you ever left this place, Southern Oregon, what would bring you back here? What would you miss the most?
Well, actually, I can tell you because I just got back here. So
Did you?
So for 6 years, I lived in Central Oregon.
Really?
Yeah, we had a vacation home in Central Oregon for over 20 years, right outside of Sun River, kind
Okay.
of between Lapine and Sun River, on the Deschutes River. I loved it, just gorgeous. And
Yeah, why'd you come back? No, I'm just kidding.
well, that's a good question. So 6 years after we sold a house, we said, well, why don't we just kind of semi-retire over there? I can work from any place, you know, have a phone and have a computer. I'm
Yeah.
working. But 6 years, we just decided that we missed spring. We were getting a little tired of winter because Central Oregon really has a winter.
They really do winter
Yeah.
real good
Yeah.
up there.
I was laughing because someone said, does it snow in Southern Oregon? I said, yes, we moved back to Ashland in February and it did snow. But in Ashland, you're talking snow for a day and a half.
Right.
And in Central Oregon, you're talking 90 days.
Right. Lots of snow.
Yeah. So anyway, but I came back primarily just because I love Southern Oregon and I love the weather. We have many friends here. I have grandkids here now, and I'd love to be more involved with my grandkids. And I'd like to actually see my son occasionally, but he's a very busy guy.
He is busy. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. I just moved back.
Okay. Final meal and final drink. What would that look like?
You know, that's tough because years ago I would have said my final meal would be like prime rib. But now I've kind of decided that I love salmon. And so, you know, I would probably say, could I have a mixed plate? Could I have some salmon
Yes, you can.
and prime rib?
Yeah.
And maybe some tofu stir fry.
Okay, wait, what?
Because I like that too. So the point is, I guess one of the things that I've learned is that, you know, and my wife is a wonderful cook. And so my mother was a terrible cook, okay? Now, she used to tell me she's raising me in supervised neglect. And so, you know, when I remember coming to her and saying, you know, I have laundry that needs to be cleaned. Great, there's the washer, there's the soap, go ahead, wash it. And, you know, I'm hungry, Mom. Great, there's the refrigerator, there's whatever, fix whatever you want. I'm out playing golf. Okay, or I'm going something else because my mother was a very outdoors woman, sailor and everything. And,
Wow.
But anyway, so I think that I've just, you know, I don't know what I would do, but I've learned that I love a lot more food. And, there's, you know, to me, I don't know about you, but I was raised in meat and potatoes.
Yep,
You know,
same, a
and-
little
and
bit.
barbecue, and that's it.
Salmon and prime rib and tofu stir fry sound delicious, though.
Exactly. So
Maybe in courses, though, not
in
all
courses.
on the same plate.
No, I think they have to be in courses.
Of
you know.
course, of
Probably
course.
the stir fry would make a nice little like salad kind of thing. You know.
Yes.
So, anyway.
Well,
Thank
Mark
you.
Dennett, I want to thank you for the humor. I want to thank you for your stories. I think my favorite one of all the stories in Off Script has to be the Wyatt, Earp, and Doc Holliday story. I just love that. You should tell that every day. And thank you for the thought-provoking little nuggets of
thank you.
wisdom. I'm going to go back and write some of those down because I really liked it.
thank you.
Thanks for sharing your stories today. If you're listening to this podcast on iTunes and you like it, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps other people find us. But we're also on several other platforms like Google Play and Stitcher. Check out the video portion of this podcast at ktvl.com. Just click on features and then Off Script one more time. Mark Dennett, no official title, Mark Dennett. Thank you so much.
Thank you.